Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 4 of the Greenway 4 podcast. Today, I'm speaking with Aaron Reveles and Shannel Pittman. So, welcome both to the show.
How's it going?
It's going well.
Hi, everyone.
Glad to have you guys on here. And we have these first time ever doing a three-person. It took a while to actually get to work, but we got it to work. So, happy to have this working. Happy to have you two on here. So, from my understanding, you guys have some sort of affiliation running together.
Yes, both of our districts overlap each other.
Oh, so you guys have just decided to kind of form an alliance for your upcoming election in 2024.
Yes.
That's
Yeah,
awesome. Yo, what are you
yeah, we
guys running
also have
for?
like kind of mutual organizing spaces. We know a lot of the same people. We've met each other a couple times before. I'm running for the 34th Congressional District of California.
How about you, Chanel?
I'm running for the 82nd Assembly District of California.
So what are the differences between the assembly district and just a general district? You mentioned you were just district, but Chanel mentioned assembly. What would be the differences between those two?
Yeah,
Um,
so
Go
go
ahead,
ahead,
Aaron.
Chanel.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah, so I'm running for congressional district, so that would be for federal office.
And the Assembly District is like for the State House of Representatives. It's
Oh, I
just called
understand.
Assembly
Okay.
in California.
Okay, that's cool. But that's awesome. You guys are kind of working together is both as third party candidates and just I've seen you guys together online and helping each other grow, and it's awesome to see those little coalitions. Even though, Aaron, you are running as Peace and Freedom, correct?
Yes.
And then Chanel's running as Green. So that's still great to see those like cross party, even though they're both leftist parties. Still great to see that cross party stuff out in California. Certainly wish you guys the best of luck, and I'll definitely be following your campaign. So very excited to see how that is.
Yeah, the Green Party and the Peace and Freedom Party have a pretty good history of working together, when we can. Just last election cycle in 2022, we had a whole slate of left unity candidates. So across all of the state elections, like for governor, lieutenant governor, Peace and Freedom Party and the Green Party worked together to not run against each other so they can run a whole slate, and it actually worked out pretty well. We had some candidates, you know our lowest candidates statewide getting like 2 to 3%, but our highest performing candidates got up to like 7 or 8%
Wow.
statewide.
That's awesome to hear. Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up because that's honestly one of my things that I'm kind of feeling about the 2024 federal election for president is that you have some people like West and Stein and De La Cruz all running as people who will garner that leftist vote. I don't know. It just makes me feel weird about the fact that it's going to be those three people who are I have respect for all three of those people, but just to see that none of them have really been helping each other whatsoever. Now, Stein did help West when he was in Green, but obviously not anymore. That he's left the Greens. But I wish there was a lot more of that leftist unity all around those parties. So if there would be some sort of coalition, I know people have talked about maybe Stein hasn't picked a VP yet, neither has West. If maybe one of them were to join forces with the other, then that could provide some sort of really strong suit to get those groups of people to vote for them instead of splitting the two. But I honestly don't know who Stein's gonna go for. I would have to guess if it wasn't someone that wasn't like West, it would probably be Baraka again, because I know them two have had a long, long history of working together.
The thing is, with that, it's frustrating because you kind of have to run a presidential candidate as a leftist third party in order to get the ballot access for your party.
Yeah, and
It's
that's
not left up to me. We would never run presidential candidates, but we have to keep the ballot line. To
absolutely, yeah,
allow people on the lower ballot lines to be able to run. It's so totally unfair.
yeah, and that really sucks that the third parties do have to gain all that ballot access every year. It's just very undemocratic for a nation that claims to be a democracy. Yeah, I mean, Constitution says if you're over 35, you can run for president, but can you really? Because you technically can. You can always be a write-in, but having that access on the ballots is going to be huge. And we just saw, I believe, Arizona just officially got. I think it was Arizona and Utah might have been. I know Arizona for sure. Not 100% sure for Utah,
It
but one
was
of them.
Arizona and Utah.
It was both. Okay, both of them did get Stein ballot access for 2024, which is good to see. But one of the
Um,
things that killed the West campaign was the loss of ballot access from switching to independent. What were you going to say, Chanel?
I was just gonna say that there's currently a primary happening in the Green Party. Stein is not the nominee yet.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'm just talking in using a shorthand just to make it easier to
Okay.
represent. Yeah, 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 yeah. I expect her to win the primary, but whenever I talk about stuff like that, I do just use Stein as an offhand to make it easier because if I said I went on to this deep explanation and made it more complex, it'd be a bit harder to follow about exactly what I'm talking about. But it
Okay,
is very
fair,
true.
fair. Just had to say it for the record.
Yeah, yeah, it's very true. Yeah, people people who may be unfamiliar and might be watching this might think that oh it's gonna be Stein, but yeah, we'll have to see primaries. But if I had to say, it would be Stein. So I'm interested to hear you guys' journey to where you're at now. Did you want to start, Aaron, about how you got to the position you're in now, what you do, everything relating to that?
Yeah. So the question is how I got to be on the left.
Absolutely. Your entire journey and what you do now. I think you mentioned you might be a public school teacher out in Los Angeles and
Yeah.
everything you do. So we're
Ooh,
excited to hear.
that's pretty long, but I'll try to keep it short. Ever since I was young, to learn how to like read and like get really good at it, my dad had me read the newspaper whenever I was with him. So I kind of got like exposed to world and California like news and politics through the LA Times newspaper, and it made me like ask a lot of questions of my dad. And he comes from like a working class background, so his answers came from a working class background, and that kind of made me think about the world because like growing up, when I'm reading the newspaper, I'm reading about like 9/11, the wars in the Middle East, uh, um, what's going on with like the Great Recession. So by the time I get into high school, I'm already kind of, I would say, like social democratic. I have like this idea where I believe that the government should make decisions to help people. But kind of going around to like the end of high school, I started listening to punk rock music a lot, so I kind of became an anarchist. um, and throughout college, I got pretty active with a couple organizations like Ideas, which is an undocumented student support group. I was in that group as an ally, and I was also in the Students for Justice for Palestine in college, and that kind of opened my eyes to like, imperialism and how Israel and the United States work together to, most of us see now, commit a genocide on the Palestinian people, and that got me active into multiple spheres. And by the time I was about to graduate college, which was 2016, is when we saw Bernie Sanders run, and then that kind of like made me start thinking of myself as a socialist because I agreed with a lot of what Bernie Sanders says. But unfortunately, when he lost, I started looking at yeah other stuff, and that led me to read like State and Revolution, Lenin. I became kind of more of a communist, and then I joined the Peace and Freedom Party because I wanted to work electorally. I ran for school board campaign, and now I'm running for Congress.
That's quite a journey, and I'm glad to hear that. I know that Peace and Freedom is, I think it's just based out of California, right? It's only in California as far as I know.
Yes, when it first started, it kind of like started in New York and California at the same time. And then I think it went up to like about a dozen to 15 states. But after like the first 8 years, it basically went down to just California.
Oh, so it's only in there. Yeah. I do. I think I heard about that during the last podcast actually that it's only based out of California because I always wondered like you know Pittsburgh has all these other coalitions and all these other groups that I've been somewhat interested in, and that was one thing I never noticed, like a Pittsburgh Peace and Freedom, that we didn't have that um in the city at all. And when I asked about it, yeah, it turns out it's based out of California. But I've liked a lot what they've said. I like a lot what Gloria La Riva has to say. She's had phenomenal, even though she hasn't had that great of a political run exactly. She's had a lot of good things to say. I enjoy listening to her speak about things, and I don't know. Does she have anything to do with current day stuff in peace and freedom in California? Because I haven't heard about her in honestly 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, she still participates at the state level. She'll be at like our state committee meetings, and
Oh, awesome.
sh yeah, so I think she kind of took a step back and retired from running for public office. She's been doing it for so long. I mean, we were happy to have her. She ran for president and governor a few times, but I think she's taking a step back.
Yeah, she deserves a break for all she's done. She's been through a lot of a lot of brutality from capitalists. I've definitely seen a lot directed towards her because she's, as we're seeing with Stein, she's one of those older women who is taking a stand against what we're seeing modern day in this country, and I have a lot of respect for her for that.
Yeah, she's great. I'm pretty sure the one of the reasons why I found out about the Peace and Freedom Party was when she was running for governor and John Parker was running for Senate, and I kind of read both of their bios in the voter guide, and that's what first made me start looking up the Peace and Freedom Party.
It's awesome. Yeah, that's what a good thing is to get through to people is honestly, run for your local office. And I've said this multiple times. Run for school board, run for those local offices that you can. When you appear on the ballot, it'll say, Dem, Rep, Independent. Then you'll see maybe what's it just PAF maybe for the abbreviation, whatever it might
Yeah,
be.
it comes up PF.
PF.
Unfortunately,
Okay.
in California, well, not unfortunately, but our local races are nonpartisan, so we
Okay.
only get our name on there if you're running for a state house, Senate, or Congress or Senate.
Okay, I understand. So that's the thing is, and that might be a good thing for, having those non-party affiliations to not really sway an election, but I do think third parties really thrive off of that happening. Whenever I was looking at just the elections that happened last month, just the local municipal county district elections, the small ones, I looked on the database that they had for the county, and it would say, most of them were Democrats or Republicans, independents, but there was also one that had GRN next to it, which is someone that I know from Allegheny Green, is the organization that I've met before. But just going and voting. These people are looking at that ballot and they see a GRN or a PF or let's say, the off chance a PSL or something like that, then that gets them interested. It's not a typical Democrat, Republican, or Independent that they're used to seeing. And that is a huge thing that can help third parties strive. And while I do appreciate nonpartisan elections like that, I do think that it really does hurt third parties because honestly, if you take a large chunk of people, they're probably going to assume that a person is either a Democrat or Republican or an independent and nothing else. And that'll really, really, really help open up eyes to those people about, oh, maybe this is X option. I have this option, and I've never heard of this party before. Let me investigate into it. And that's a good thing about running for school board. If someone, if you can spare, at least in my township, it's an hour a month plus like 5 to 10 hours of planning for the whole month. So you're really, really only putting at most 12 hours a month into running for school board. And if you can get on, even if you can just get on the ballot and open people's eyes up to things, or if you are running unopposed, I mean, there's plenty of places in this country that might have a vote 5 school board and only 3 people are running. Go get on the ballot, and you don't even have to do any campaigning. You'll be on there. Getting a third party, especially a Green or a Peace and Freedom, anyone on there is going to be so beneficial, not just for the school board itself, but to open people's eyes up and see that these people in these representative positions of power are this foreign party that none of us have ever really heard of before. Do you want to tell us
Yeah.
about your school board experience that you had mentioned before?
Oh yeah. This was 2 years ago in 2022. Well, I guess only a year and a half now, but um, uh, I went to a charter school protest because they had a co-location literally a block away from where I live, where the charter school was taking rooms from the public school, and I kind of got involved in that. And a couple of the people there at the protests said I should run for school board. I ran with only like $2,500, and I got 7,000 votes. Um, I got one vote for every 40 cents I spent, and everyone else that ran spent at least $4 or $5 per vote. So I kind of, by money wise, I blew it out of the water. But there was 3 seats up, and I got in fourth place, which was a little frustrating. But it was my first time, and then I also was brand new, so um, and I entered the race a little late. The teachers union had already endorsed people, but hopefully I'm hoping to run next time for school board again. And I've been doing a lot of work with that teachers union, and I'm in the teachers union myself, just with the district right over. So I'm hoping they'll endorse me next time, and we'll have a pretty good shot at winning that one next time.
Yeah, it's awesome, and that does that. A lot of that cost probably has to do with the fact that you're running in such a densely populated area as Los Angeles. I assume it was out of Los Angeles that you ran for school board at.
Yes, it was actually Montebello School Board. So I live in like a weird part of East LA that's not in Los Angeles Unified. Like a very little tiny piece is in the school district over.
Okay, I see. Yeah, so that probably has to do a lot with that cost, and people might hear that it's like, oh, it's $2,500. I don't think I can spend that to run, but realistically, most people aren't going to be in in or near Los Angeles or a big city like even Pittsburgh to run in school boards isn't going to put you that down because you have all these little suburbs outside that might have a max population of 10 or 15,000 people. You can get on the ballot and do your campaign for likely under $500 if you're running in a small town of, let's say, 10,000 people. You don't have to do a lot of campaigning. You don't have to do a ton of canvassing. You want to get yourself out there as much as you can, of course, but figure out free ways to do that. Maybe you make an advertisement online on your Facebook or maybe it appears on your town's website that you might be giving a speech in the park or anything like that to just cut those costs and still get your name out there is going to be huge for you because cost is going to be a turn off to people, and it's completely understandable why you wouldn't want to do that, especially running as a third party when you automatically are at a disadvantage when you're at a party that not people aren't familiar with. But that's okay because you can definitely counter those, and I'm glad that you shared your story because if you can get 7,000 votes running as third party in Los Angeles, although you did spend $2,500, it's still going to be really important for those who want to run locally to just, you have to obviously do some planning and prepping, but to find out that cost may not be as high as you think, and you might be able, if you live in the middle of nowhere and you want to run for school board, you might just be able to run unopposed, and getting that party name out there is going to be what's best to help the entire left unity in general.
Definitely.
Now, what about you, Chanel? You want to share your story about your journey to becoming leftist, and also how you decided to run for the assembly?
Okay, sure, no problem. I'll start off by saying that I was literally the worst until about 2016. That is to say, I'm black, and the only party I was ever told existed was the Democratic Party. So I didn't get the option of knowing that I could register green or peace and freedom when I was registering to vote at 18. Like, I don't even think I saw the option to register to vote green or peace and freedom when I was registering to vote at 18. And it was like, how am I supposed to register to vote? Oh, we're black, so we're Democrats. Okay, fair enough. If that's the rule, that's the rule. And so for me, I got politically engaged just a little bit in terms of caring about what happened with the world after 9/11. It wasn't that I didn't care before, it was that 9/11 was a scary thing that happened that like made me feel some type of way, like something about how it was being covered in the news wasn't right. But I was only 11 years old, so I couldn't put my finger on exactly what was wrong. Something just didn't feel right, and it made me feel all itchy. And I wasn't Muslim at the time, so I saw the change of how people were treating Muslims, and it made me feel uncomfortable, but I didn't know why. Turns out it made me feel uncomfortable because I'm Muslim, go figure. But I didn't have the option to change religions until I got older, but that's a whole nother story. So for me, I was living my life chilling, being community activist where I could as a person in high school. I remember I went to a charter school. Charter schools are kind of bad for people with disabilities. I have cerebral palsy myself, and we didn't have a very good department for people with disabilities at my school. But I managed to get out of high school at least. And while I was in high school, I remember I convinced the principal to let us do a fundraiser for, I think it was Thailand. There was a big, like, typhoon or something. They were giving us a test to make sure we knew the rules because target schools can do that. And I convinced the principal to make it so that for every person that passed the test, they donated money to Thailand. And that was like the only major activist thing I did as a high school student because it was the only thing I could think to do when I wasn't really very politically educated. I had some pretty good government teachers, but they didn't teach us about all the parties that existed either. They just taught us about the Constitution and about the history of gangs in Los Angeles, which was really cool. And for me, I just felt like something wasn't right about how things were going governmentally, but I didn't know how to find that information or learn anything about how to make sense of it because no one had ever taught me that and I didn't know where to start. So fast forward to 2016, and I watched all of my friends on Facebook raise all this money to get to the Democratic National Convention because they were delegates for Bernie Sanders. And I had been listening to what Bernie Sanders had to say, and everything he had to say as a presidential candidate was something I was expecting presidential candidates to say. Again, not knowing about the Peace and Freedom Party or the Green Party, I didn't know that there were other candidates saying this stuff for my entire life. So he's the first candidate who I see that's not running with corporate money, not taking money from the war machine, saying that war is wrong and all these other things that I truly believe in as a person. And I'm like, surely there's no way the Democratic National Party would like screw this guy over. Hillary Clinton is extremely unpopular and Donald Trump is scary. So come on, they gotta let it happen this time. I mean, surely they can see. Oh, by the way, I was also on Tumblr watching all this information come in about the voting machines and how they were designed to flip votes or something. I don't know how true that is, so don't quote me on that, but that's what Tumblr was saying. So it was just like I was watching all of my friends raise all this money doing all this work for Bernie Sanders. And I remember watching the Democratic National Convention on TV. And I watched all of my friends' little hearts get broken. And I was upset because I was angry too because it didn't make any sense. And then I was like, the reason I say that I was the worst is because I remember saying and making a couple of videos to this effect on Facebook, asking myself, asking people in general, if the Green Party is so great, where are they? Why don't I ever see Green candidates anywhere? How come you're not running for anything? But I didn't know about ballot access suppression or anything like that because I didn't know. I did not know a lot about how much money it takes to get on the ballot or the different rules because you're not a Democrat or Republican, man. I was so stupid. And I admit the fact that I was really, really stupid and I didn't learn this stuff until 2016 as I came into being pissed off and knowing that I didn't want to be a Democrat anymore because that was messed up. Common sense says if you're trying to stop a Donald Trump and you have a Bernie Sanders, then logically, if this is the anti-war candidate, then you should accept that candidate as your nominee, but they didn't, and that was messed up. I didn't learn until later that Bernie Sanders is like, I'm going to vote for every war funding possible because Vermont makes planes for war and that's their economy, apparently. I learned a lot of stuff in 2016, okay? But once I learned what I learned, as soon as I was able to register to vote again, which was later in 2016 because my ID had expired, it took me a minute to replace my ID. But once my ID was replaced, I registered green and have been green ever since. And I would have been green when I turned 18, but I didn't know that it was an option. And honestly, the only reason, because I want to work electorally and the Green Party has more ballot access, I'm probably green for that reason. I mean, there's so much overlap between the Green Party and the Peace and Freedom Party that it's hard for me to. It's really hard, okay? Because I want to be in both and I can't.
It's really that coalition, though. I mean, you and Aaron working together, and it's not like it has to be a polarization kind of thing. And I'm really glad that, at least in California, they've kind of formed that coalition to have that unity to prevent any splitting of anything. So I'm really glad that at least you have that backing. So like here in Pennsylvania, there's of course no peace and freedom, but we do a lot of overlap in Allegheny Greens and the PA Green Party. We do form coalitions with Pittsburgh Democratic Socialists. And I could, I do have various problems with Democratic Socialists of America, but I do appreciate what we have done with them and the coalitions that we formed. Even things such as, the Pittsburgh workers and things such as that. Just take a look at what you have locally and get those unities together, and that's really great to hear out of California. That's what you have, and I do appreciate also the perspective that you gave Chanel is that you were only told, oh, we just have to be Democrats then, because I've never heard that out of someone before, and I've only had enough for a few podcast episodes, but I've never talked to someone who was just told like, oh, like we're black, so we have to vote Democrat, and I feel like that might have led to you taking a while to get out of the Democratic Party, but you realize in 2016, and a lot of people also realize in 2016. I was talking last night just over a call with um, Justin Bath, who is the co-chair of the Green Party of Maine, and he told me that he was even a delegate for Bernie Sanders in 2016, and then he realized the rigging that they did for the primaries and just found that very suspicious. And a lot of people that I've talked to who have become Greens and leftists have also experienced very similar concerns to what happened in 2016 to Bernie, back before we knew what he really was. But we're talking about the 2016 version, him as someone that a lot of us did respect, and that broke a lot of people out of the duopoly show. So very interesting that you shared that, and same with you, Aaron. Did you want to add anything else, Chanel?
Um, only that the only other thing that made me go more left is learning about how they were using algorithmic policing to like essentially what's the word I'm looking for? Anyways, I don't like algorithmic policing, and the more I learned about what the police were doing in LA County, the more left I began to get because I needed to understand and dig deep into that to get to a point of where I could speak more clearly on these issues because I had my issues with police brutality and I don't like having PTSD, but it happens.
Yeah, that's a very interesting perspective. One that, but again, I've never heard of before, and you can give that perspective as someone out in the Los Angeles area, and that's another thing that can help open your eyes. And we all have our various stories on what radicalizes us, but that's definitely a very unique story, and I thank you on sharing. So I also want to discuss that you guys were, since you're actually been running, um, what your main sort of platforms are when taking running into consideration. Like, for example, I'll start with you, Aaron. What is your main focus on what you're running for what you are up for in 2024? I believe you're going to be up for election in 2024.
Yes. No. Well, yes, in March.
Okay, so March 2024. So that's actually coming up really soon. Wow. Did you want to share what the main platforms, policies, issues that you personally plan on running and have communicated to people with in Los Angeles?
Yeah, yeah. The election's super soon. The mail-in ballots already go out about a week or two into February, so it's coming up. But what I've been trying to tell people is like the main point of our race is to build independent socialist power. So what we really want people to do is get involved, even if it's not with the Green or Peace and Freedom Party, at least registering so we can get our numbers up. Joining our local tenants union. A lot of the people helping our campaign work with the Los Angeles Tenants Union, and that's one of our main sticking points. Is if you're not in a party, if you're not organized, do it. And it doesn't have to be with a political party. It could be with a community organization or an independent organization in your community. But I think the things that we're mostly hitting on is that we want, housing for all. If you might have heard that Los Angeles has very expensive housing,
Mm.
we want to push, no, not just like this very vague affordable housing, because then when we ask like affordable for who, and it's still housing that's 30 to 50% of your income, or housing that they might build like a 20 unit housing but only like 3 are affordable housing. We want like full public housing that's owned and controlled by workers. We want a transit system that's not only free but that is easy to get around, that comes multiple times, that's safe, that is kept clean, that people want to use, so we can move away from um, always being stuck in traffic, move away from using so much gas. We want an economic bill of rights to give workers the power to strike whenever they want, to give workers the power to unionize whenever they want. We want citizenship for all and voting rights for undocumented people and residents, so we can really get everyone involved in our democratic process. Because in Los Angeles, since we do have so many people who are from other countries, in my district, we have about 40% of people who are not born here, who are born in a different country. And they might not all be undocumented, but a lot of them are residents and they still can't vote, which I think is unfair if they're paying taxes, if they're contributing to, our society. A Medicare for all that's not just single payer, but a universal system that is owned by the government, so we don't have to. It's not just becomes a thing where we're just throwing money at an insurer. That we actually have bargaining power to discuss prices. And our main one of my main things that start off with, but I ended with here, because it's what a federal government would deal with is diplomacy and not war. So kind of the way I like to explain it is taking all of our um, getting our military budget and cutting it significantly so that we don't have 800 bases around the world. So we're not contributing to the genocide in Palestine. So we can take a step back from being the world policeman and actually focus on raising the standard of living of people in the United States. Because I think it's ridiculous that we spend pretty much $1 trillion a year um, on the military when we have tens of thousands of homeless people in Los Angeles, or other hundreds of thousands of people who are, if they miss one paycheck, they'll end up being homeless.
Yeah, in Los Angeles, and we're just talking in Los Angeles alone. You have those tens of thousands of people, and multiply that by however many, and that's how many you have across the country. And it's just a shame on that we're ignoring a lot of those people's needs for war. And hey, war is really, really good for politicians. So of course they're gonna do that in their best interests, and all they're gonna get is that money. And I had talked about on the last episode on how in PA there was a vote to ban cash money gifts, that's saying that you can't give a specified amount of money. It might be over 2,500 or so. I'm not exactly sure on the number, but it was just to ban uh, cash gifts for politicians, as it would be is they would consider it a form of bribery. And as great as that would be if that passed, we're not going to see that passed, because that's basically it'd be like asking the Senate to vote on lowering their salary. You're not going to get a single vote for that, because of course they're not going to vote to lower their salary. Of course these politicians are not going to ask and vote for a opportunity to miss opportunity of a cash grab. Let's say you're running for governor, you get $100,000 from an oil company, and you're gonna just vote that away. No politician is gonna do that, and that's the problem with these corporate donors, is they are quite literally able to decide the outcomes of elections before they even happen. And that's why I do think the term corporate dictatorship is very appropriate to describe most places in the US and how our elections do take place. And another thing that you had mentioned that I've never talked about before, but it's one of my very niche weird interests of mine, is public transport. I absolutely love light rail and things like that. Now, I'm not too familiar with the Los Angeles system, so I'll have a couple questions about that. But the Pittsburgh system for our public transit is, I would probably give it a B grade. we have a light rail system that runs all the way down south. It's about 10 to 12 miles long. Starts all the way down south in a suburb and goes all the way to the North Shore of the city. But the problem is there's only two paths that it takes. It starts here, and they go their own ways, and they meet at the end. Now, while it's a great system for people who might need to go into work and such, there's only so many places it stops at, and not that many people will have access directly to that from their homes. Usually, you have to go to a park and ride and drive your car down and then park there, and that kind of defeats the whole point of it. You might have to drive 5-10 minutes just to get to a station, and they only follow two sets of paths. The odds that you're within one of those stations is high if you are in the designated area, but if you're anywhere outside that area, you pretty much have no options on taking that light rail. And now the thing that Pittsburgh is pretty well known for is the bus system. The bus system is very vast. It runs a lot of places in the city. Outside the city, it runs a lot of places outside the city. I've seen it up north, out west. I've seen it everywhere outside the city. A good 10 miles or so outside the city, I've seen it ran, and it's very active in the middle of the city. Now, I don't know if you've ever been to Pittsburgh before, but you will see one of those buses every minute. You'll see one of those buses every minute if you're driving through the city, and it's a great system. The bus system is phenomenal, but light rail tends to be better in my opinion because we can get people places faster, cover longer distances. The bus system, while great, if you're traveling from 10 miles south of the city to the city, it's going to take a lot longer to get on a bus from a bus all the way up there than through a light rail system. The light rail system is not necessarily high speed, but it still travels at a very fast pace between stations, and it doesn't make a ton of stops um, along the lines up to the city. And the other thing with bus systems here, at least in Pittsburgh, is a good thing that we have our own bus highways. So while buses do travel on public roads, there are some designated areas of the city for buses only. They're called busways, and the only vehicles allowed on there are buses, and occasionally the light rail will go on there because they have tracks built into to just make a small little cut, and it's only for public transport only. And I've I've been on a couple of those busways, and it is phenomenal to see that you have these lines of buses that are taking people, and just to think about all that gas that's saved, all that energy that's saved just from one bus to see all these people getting transported daily. It's a real good sight to see. Now, I think it can be improved, especially with the light rail. I feel like the bus system is very solid in itself. The light rail, though, can very much be expanded. Now, there was a proposition passed very recently, and it did pass about expanding the light rail by 2035. The only problem with that is we're almost in 2024. They could choose to do that in 2034 for all we know. We might not have an expansion for another 10 years. And the thing with the light rail is it actually used to be bigger than what it is now. Right now we have three lines technically, but there's only two paths that it can take. We just have an extra line for some reason. I have no idea why. But there used to be more lines. There used to be another line that runs south, even more south than it does now. But that shut down in 1999. There was a very old line back whenever before it became a light rail system, and it was just a purely streetcar system that used to go even more south than what it is now on the other line. And that got shut down in the 60s. That's been gone for a while. There used to be another line that goes through the Allentown neighborhood of Pittsburgh that makes another 10 additional stops. And then in 2012 or 2013, one of those years, Pittsburgh Light Rail cut about 10 stations from the light rail, those that were considered underused and maybe were decrepit, because the reason why they decided to remove those stations, and we also saw the removal of Pennant Station in 2021, is, at least my theory, is that all those stations were built before 1990. And if they want to do any sort of major revisions to those, a lot of those haven't been repaired since 1990. Some of them are like built into hillsides and stairs are falling apart. The thing about expanding those stations after 1990 is if you do any major renovations, by law, you have to then accommodate for the Americans with Disabilities Act. So if we see any sort of major restorations or renovations to these stations that were built before 1990 that have since been shut down by the Pittsburgh Public Regional Transit is that they would have to build ramps, and if you couldn't have a ramp, you maybe have to have an elevator going down there, and that's just going to add much more to the cost. Speaking about what I said before about Pennant Station that shut down a couple years ago, that was in a very remote location. It was built into the side of a hill, very, very high up off the main road. A place you really couldn't get any like repair vehicles to, and it would be very hard not to just repair it, but to also cut through a ramp or cut something to make it easier for to comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act. It would be very, very, very difficult to do so. So the Pittsburgh Regional Transit, which was been known as by a port authority up until very recently, they decided to just shut that station down. And those other stations that were underused and underfunded, they might have just thought, oh, we couldn't do upkeep here. But I do think a major thing with that is that they might not just want to deal with ADA compliance, which could be a big problem, especially if we expanded the light rail system. I mean, if that light rail gets expanded to some more lines than what it is now, I mean, they would have to do a lot of that renovation to certain stations, and not only are you paying for new rails and new lines and new cars, but you're also paying for that ADA compliance. And I think that's a huge turnoff to our local government to try to make things better in that regard. Did you want to talk about the Los Angeles regional transportation before we move on to the next topic?
Yeah. For so ours, I feel like a lot of people say our public transportation is terrible. I think it's like okay. I mean, out of the entire country, we probably have a pretty developed public transportation system, but that's not saying much compared to the rest of the country. Just like Pittsburgh, we used to have like a streetcar and trolley system that covered way more than our light rail does now. But Los Angeles is the birthplace of car culture. So back in the 30s and 40s, car companies kind of lobbied to get rid of all that infrastructure. So we became the first car city in America. Um, but our city has done a pretty decent job of expanding our light rail. But the fight that a lot of organizations are doing right now on the ground is to make public transit free. Because right now, the public transit's about $1.75 every time you take it, and then passes are going to be like $20 a week or almost up to like $80 for the month. And then for working class people who are already paying like, $1,500 to $2,000 in rent, we believe that's too much. So a lot of community organizations right now are focusing on making the transit free. We do want more transit. We do want to expand it, but the main fight right now is to make it free.
That's very interesting, and you mentioned it was $1.75. I'd honestly expect it to be a lot more. In Pittsburgh's public transit system, it is $2.75 per ride. Now, it gets you anywhere you want. You can ride the bus or the light rail for as long as you want, and you'll only pay for that one fare. In fact, we do have free fare, but it's very circumstantial. If you are a senior, you can apply once you're 65 years old. You can apply, and within a few weeks, you'll be sent your senior citizen rider card, and that lets you in for free for bus rides and light rail rides, which that's a great thing to do, but we should expand it to encompass everyone. And there's also something called the free fare zone. Now, most of the light rail, now I can't speak on the buses for this, but at least on the light rail, um, most of the light rail is not in the city. There's only about 6 stations that are actually in the city of Pittsburgh, and those have the very traditional stations that you'd expect, a big, underground station that you'd expect from New York or London per se. There's only a few of those major, gigantic stations, and those are all in the city, and there's very few of those. But the ones in the city is labeled the free fare zone. Once you cross the river on the light rail, if you are just riding between those stations, the fare box on the light rail is actually disabled, and it's just known as the free fare zone. If you're riding from um, more towards the south side to the north shore on the light rail, you don't pay a fare. And I think that's a great uh, start to seeing things like that. I mean, it would be very not a very good idea to charge people 275 to quickly get from one part of the city to the other. And I think it's a great idea that we started with something like that with the free fare zone. But a problem with that is, and although a lot of people will ride the light rail from the south to the city, the problem with that is that not everyone is going to be doing that. That most of the stations, I believe there are, oh man, if I had to think, I think there would be about 50 to 60 stations on the light rail. There's quite a lot for how short it is. And although it's very high speed, although it's very efficient, a lot of those stations people are going to be not going to the city. They might go investigate some things closer to the city, but not to the city itself. And the fact that only 10% of the line is actually in the city, and that's the only line that you can get the free fare at, really just screws over a lot of people, honestly, because those people that are going to be south of the city, those 10 miles south of the city that want to take that light rail, is going to have to deal with that fare every single time. And there are people who will live right off the light rail. There's plenty of people who live in in the surrounding streets that might only have a 5-10 minute walk to the light rail to take. Some of those light rail stations stop in front of people's houses. There's a few, like Stevenson Station on the Red Line in Pittsburgh. It stops right in the middle of a neighborhood, and people are able to get out there. But the problem with that 275 fare is that not everyone's going to the city. Not everyone is going to be just touring the city and taking advantage of that free fare. It goes to everywhere in the South Hills of Pittsburgh. So that's another main problem I have with that. And I would love to see that free fare be expanded to everyone, and especially with redirecting our tax dollars. And I do think we can make that happen, especially in a smaller city. I say small even though it's quite vast, but compared to other cities in the country, Pittsburgh is one of the smallest if you consider all major cities in the country. And I feel like it'd be a bit easier to do than Los Angeles, but has there been any developments, at least in Los Angeles, that would have to deal with public transit in that regard?
Yeah. Well, the thing about how you said 175 is cheap. Like you um like I was saying before, um the groups that have been working to make it free, they actually blocked a proposed raise increase. It was supposed to go to 225 this past summer, but a lot of workers and a lot of nonprofits and a lot of organizations got together to actually fight back against that, and they're able to keep the price at the same. And not only that, but we also got more money to make it free for students, to keep it free for seniors, to make it so that um, if you buy a ticket, even if you're transferring for 2 hours, you don't you don't have to buy another ticket. So those are some pretty good developments. One development that came recently is the president. He gave us money to. Sorry, I'm getting like money to build uh uh s- uh a train system to go from here to Las Vegas.
Oh wow.
But we have uh California has a historic thing with high speed rail that a lot of money gets dumped into it and not much gets very built. So we'll see how that goes. But our governor has been pouring billions and billions of dollars into high speed rail. We have nothing to show for it. So hopefully it doesn't become something like that again. I think what's happening is they're getting a lot of money for it, and then someone's cousin or someone's brother-in-law is getting paid a lot of money from our tax dollars to build very little, and then the proposed project will take 2 years, but then it becomes 8 years, but which it becomes 5 times as much. Unfortunately, what happens a lot when you have one political party that runs your entire state and they can do whatever they want. But Chanel, I'm pretty sure I probably missed something from our program because me and Chanel uh, we're sharing one entire program. The only thing that I have on our program is immigration reform and uh, our foreign policy. That's the only thing we have different because I'm running a federal race and she's running a state race. Chanel, did I miss anything from our program that you want to talk about?
No, you didn't miss anything. I checked. You didn't miss anything. I checked while you were talking.
All right, that's good. Is there anything you think you could expand on better? Because me and Chanel, one good thing that we have that we're running together is, you know, we might know all of our stuff, but Chanel knows some stuff better than I do, and I know some stuff better. So that's kind of one good thing that we like is when we're ever talking, we kind of like both being there, so we can kind of cover each other's strengths and weaknesses.
Did you have anything you wanted to expand on, Chanel, as you said, what he had said earlier?
There's not anything I really want to expand on too much, except that in our district, we have a problem with the water being contaminated with cancer causing chemicals because of the manufacture of weapons.
That's
So, in
causing.
order to get the cancer causing chemicals out of the water, so that I can shower without feeling like panicked about it, because we can't drink the water in our district because it's contaminated with chromium. And chromium is one of those chemicals that you need to use in order to bend metal to make bombs. In order to stop that contamination, we need to stop the manufacturing of, well, we need to stop the excessive manufacturing of wars of war machines. If we could use what we have and then stop making more, we could have cleaner water. And that's something I'd like to see because the levels of cancer in the district, particularly in East LA, is really, really high
Yeah, I
between
never.
the lead and the chromium.
Yeah, it's something very interesting that I never even thought about that weapons manufacturing could really impact the water supply. But you hear all the time about Flint, Michigan, and that's the only really story you hear. But I've never heard of anything that happened in Los Angeles to pertain to that, and that's something that no, I'm sure you guys have done some work for your personal campaigns, and that's also another very important thing to hopefully be accomplished. Upcoming next election cycle, and yeah, the water problem is something that's gonna probably take a while to fix, and in Pittsburgh, we're seeing still a lot of those copper pipes. There are some people who have made the switch to plastic pipes to prevent that lead and any other metals to get into the water. But I feel like one thing that a lot of people aren't pushing for enough who are running for Congress and people who are activists like myself who don't focus on enough is that water supply. That's probably one of the most important things that people just fail to recognize is like, yeah, this is a huge problem and this is something that we need to actually focus on. And Chanel had mentioned about limiting the weapons manufacturing, but Aaron, I was curious if you had any other thoughts to say about what could be done for helping the water supply specifically to Los Angeles like that.
Yeah, I think with just with most places, we don't spend the money on our infrastructure. We don't if if it's not profitable for a company or if the public city doesn't see that they have the budget for it, they rather spend money on the cops than updating our infrastructure. We have so much lead in our pipes or pipes that have been built 100 years ago that they don't bother repairing because it just costs too it not that it costs too much money, but we'd rather spend billions of dollars on giving cops military gear that we don't have any money for anything else. And we have our public transit system that doesn't that isn't clean, that it doesn't isn't upkeeped. We have trains that go down, but then we have police nearby checking, not anymore, but before we just had police checking people for tickets when our elevator isn't working. And that just shows that the priority of the city is not to make sure that the city is working for everyone to get, go to work, live their daily lives, but that the priority is to making sure that the people in the city are being watched and supervised by the police. So I think one of the biggest things is, we go back to 2 years ago with defunding the police, is that we need to make sure that we move away money from the police departments to fund things like this. And even if you look at the entire country, if you look at uh, if the police were its own military, that they would be the third largest military in the world
Wow.
behind the United States and China, in terms of spending. So that just shows how much the United States spends on violence and destruction. And if we even just took half of that and spent it uh, on people's needs, that we could be like one of the best nations to live for people. But right now, our priorities are all messed up. Our priorities are based on human greed and making sure that we have the tools necessary to suppress the working class.
Yeah.
And we need to flip that.
And that's capitalism at its finest, truly. A lot of people just say, "Oh, you can't just use capitalism as an excuse for everything." You can use that to blame it on a lot of problems that we're seeing in this country. And something that it shocked me just reading this morning was that there was a homeless woman that was found dead in her tent in New York City, and she had been eaten by rats in New York City. And New York City has such a homeless problem, but there was data that came out yesterday that just on pure overtime pay alone, the NYPD spent $155 million it was either in 2022 or 2023. The NYPD spent $155 million on just overtime pay alone for their officers. And the fact that they can spend that 155 million on pure overtime itself, that's quite a lot. That's also massive, massive police force. The fact that they can spend all that, but will completely ignore the homeless problem. I mean, the same people who say, "Oh, we need to keep all this funding here," are the same people that say, "Oh, we have such a homeless problem, and people just need to go get up and get jobs." It's like there's absolutely no compassion there, and it's all purely based on that need for wealth and that human greed nature that you had brought up. And even if we just save 10,000 people from going full homeless, or we bring people out of homelessness or poverty, even if it's just 10,000 people, that's not enough to, of course, solve the problem in this country. But if we can just save that many people from, dying due to homelessness or falling below that poverty line, that would be huge. And the fact that we have all this money to spend on police overtime, but we're told we can't spend any money on helping the homeless or those in poverty is just absolutely insane to me. There was a new statistic that came out recently that 40% of homeless people have a full-time job and work at least 32 hours a week. The fact that that has to even be a problem, that you can work hard for full time and still be homeless, just goes to show the absolute detrimental effects of capitalism in this country. And they always, oh yeah, but they're like fast food workers. Well, so what? Fast food workers are people that I have the most respect for because
Actually, can
because
I
they are
interrupt you and
absolutely,
go
yeah.
on a rant
Go
about
ahead,
that?
go ahead.
So it's it's pretty crazy that in LA more homeless people die of freezing to death in New York, which is crazy because we're known for great weather. But it shows how inhumane we treat homeless people. Over here, people they blame homeless people for so many problems that are just symptoms of capitalism or just symptoms of our government not doing anything, that people complain that our streets are dirty and unkept, but it is our cities that are not cleaning our streets. And then it's we treat homeless people so inhumanely that we had just recently, this past month, we had a serial killer going around targeting homeless people, and he killed 3 homeless people before he was even caught. He wasn't even caught until a four, um at the end of the 4 days in, where he tried to kill a person who wasn't homeless, and that's when they finally caught him. And it's not even just people who are minimum wage workers that are homeless. We have people, it was a very famous study that made me get into um, housing affordability about 7 years ago. Was there's many nurses and teachers, people who are professionals that have to live out of their cars because the cost of living is so high, and it's just ridiculous that you have people, who don't even just have bachelor's degrees but have other certificates and credentials, have you going to work school for 6 years, and those people still have to live out of their car to afford to live.
I know people with PhDs that live out of their cars.
Exactly.
Yeah, we're doing nothing to help those people either. I mean, you're just told, and here's the fallacy that we're being told in this country is that you're being told if you have student debt that's keeping you down, that's causing you to live paycheck to paycheck, you're told you shouldn't have went to college and gotten a real job. But if you don't go to college and get a job instead, you're told that's not a real job. You should have went to college and get a real job. And that's what we're told by capitalists every single day. And they can't take accountability for their own actions. They can't take accountability for the broken system. They have to blame the poor for it. And that's why we have this propaganda in the US. You have so many people that believe that all homeless people are due to the drugs. You shouldn't give homeless people money because they'll use that for drugs. That is a purely fiction. Of course, there's going to be a small percentage who do that, and as for any sort of statistic that you would, any sort of group that you would bring up, but that was a purely fictional propaganda technique used by capitalists to not help these people whatsoever because they're told they're not worth your time. They're lazy bums who don't work at all. But you have these people who work 40 hours a week serving burgers at McDonald's. They are hard workers. McDonald's is one of the most popular restaurants in this country. They get so much foot traffic. They have to fill so many orders. They have to deal with getting everything exactly right. They have to deal with angry customers on the daily. Those people I have so much respect for, and the fact that in a capitalist society we see them as the lowest of the low is just horrific. Uh, there's no other words to describe it. That all these
But
people are living off the streets.
but I do want to say that even if you didn't have a 32-hour a week job, there's no excuse for anyone in this country to be in homelessness. The country has too much money to allow this. I mean, we have to change federal laws in order for public housing to be built. And it's frustrating to me
Yeah, and
because
even
for me,
our state laws with Coastal Hawkins, where we can't have rent control on certain buildings because of that law.
yeah, it needs to be repealed, and that's one of the things that I'm gonna work on if I happen to get elected. But there are like 7 people in the race, so I'm hoping that I do well. But we'll see.
That's a great thing that you brought up. And yeah, even if 100% of the homeless people in this country did not work full-time jobs, the fact that a country that's supposedly the greatest nation on earth, the richest country on earth, the fact that we're just and there's no excuse for it. Whenever you hear people say homelessness is a choice, it is a choice by the government. There is literal policies that are influencing it. These homeless people are not choosing to be homeless. It is the government choosing that path for them, depending on where they're at. I mean, we saw in PA up until very recently, the minimum wage was still $7.25 in 2023. The fact that we still think that that is acceptable to be paying people is and you're paying people $7.25 an hour who are working hard, dealing with all this foot traffic, dealing with angry customers, dealing with getting every order right, and all they're doing is making someone rich that they'll never meet in their entire lives. It's just horrible. And the best like the best part about it is we're told that we can't afford it. If you bring up any sort of good for society policy change, the government will always tell you, "Oh, we can't afford it. We can't afford it. We can't afford it. We can't afford it." But you bet your bottom dollar that we can send money for wars at any given time. You bet your bottom dollar that we can raise salaries for government employees at any given time. That we can fund the Willow Project at any given time. If we want to go drill for oil in Alaska, we can do that at any given time. But it's such a horrible thing to make sure people have a place to stay every night. And Pittsburgh has had some good improvements with that. I believe it's on Forbes Avenue, which is a major street in the city of Pittsburgh. That there is a public housing building. It's just a single one, but it does house a fairly significant amount of people. And even if we're just working on something like that, that's very good. And the problem with things that might be incremental, like we're seeing with the minimum wage, yeah, the minimum wage was 7.25, But it's not much higher now because our Governor Shapiro decided instead of setting the minimum wage immediately to 15 for the next 5 years, it's incrementally going to increase, and it's not going to be able to keep up with inflation. Incrementalism is such a horrible thing, and that's the problem with incrementalism is that if the Democratic Party decides to go with the Republicans and try to compromise, the Republicans will never compromise. So Democrats just keep moving further right, further right, further right, further right, further right, until they finally reach a position. And that position is usually nothing like the original deal. Instead, it's incrementalism, and we're going to see the minimum wage be increased to $15 only in the year 2027. Which by then, inflation is not going to be able to keep up with that. It's not going to be able to keep up with these incremental increases. We're seeing a lot of incremental people who will use incrementalist tactics, they will say we need affordable instead of universal, affordable healthcare. Well, affordable for who? Is affordable $10 a month or is affordable $200 a month? Instead of making things affordable and taking those incremental steps, we should be making it universal, publicly funded. All it should be a pure public commodity like that. And when you're told
It's
affordable,
frustrating because these are investing in people are how you have a better functioning country, a better functioning state. If you just invest in the well-being of the people, you have people that are healthy, that are housed, and when you house people, their mental health gets better.
yeah,
When
that's a
you
great point.
have people having access to food, everything about their lives gets better. So I don't understand, and it frustrates my soul that the government doesn't want to invest in people here. You'll invest in money to go to other countries to fund things we need here, or you'll invest in war.
But we can't afford
It
it.
just pisses me off.
But we can't afford it, they say. But we can't afford it, they say. And oh man, I've truly glad that and this was very recent to me. It's only been over the past 6 months or so that I've truly woken up to this, and it's just made me realize on how terrible this country really is towards people. I mean, if you're not making six figures, country wants nothing to do with you because they see you as a non-productive member of society. You could be so much more hardworking than any CEO out there flipping burgers at Burger King in a high traffic area. And you're going to be told you are a no life lazy bum because all you do is flip burgers at Burger King. You
People
are
forget how
adding.
dangerous that job is.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, working in a kitchen is not the safest thing in the world and you got to deal with things, this isn't sitting in an office, CEOs, this isn't sitting in an office just waiting for my money to roll in all day. This is being on your feet active and they work so hard for such little pay, and those people I have great respect for because although they're being exploited, some of them are standing up, forming unions, but they are great allies to us, and I do appreciate all those um, workers. Just and yeah, you had mentioned Chanel, it is a very dangerous job to work, and no one's taking that into consideration whatsoever. Whenever you are a CEO of a company or you are someone very high up who is purely making a paycheck off of the labor of everyone else down below you, you are not really adding anything to society. If you are making a burger at, let's say, Burger King, you are receiving money from this person that goes into the corporation, and you are providing a meal to them. You are providing something for society by working hard in your position as flipping burgers. It could be something as simple as that, and that's used by capitalists to drown out those hardworking. And you're told all you need to do, the American dream. You just need to be a hardworking American, and you will have a house, a car, and a family. You'll have a life of luxury and a great retirement if you just become a hardworking American. Well, how many hardworking Americans right now are on the streets because they're being neglected by capitalists who decide that they can dictate what counts as a real job. Flipping burgers isn't a real job, they say. If you do
Oh,
anything
it's not
really
a
as a
real
job,
job, but if everyone who flipped burgers or worked at Waffle House stopped coming to work for one day, the whole country would shut down.
oh, and that's yeah. They say it's on a real job, but exactly if everyone just decided on a random Wednesday, say in the middle of the week to make it more chaotic, on a random Wednesday, no one was going to show up for their shift at a restaurant. No one was going to show up for a restaurant at a grocery store. For that just one day, the entire country collapses because of that. So you want to talk about who's not a real worker? It's those people who are the foundation of this country's economy. But we don't like to recognize that in this country, and it's very sad. And that's why I'm glad to speak with you two who do believe that they are very productive members of society, because there are plenty of people in the duopoly who will think that they are absolutely not productive members of society. You should go get a real job. This is a very real job someone's working so hard for, and the fact that they're discredited for that just makes me sad to no end.
Yeah, one thing I'd like to touch on is I mean, even with the Democratic Party, there are people. I don't want to give them more than they should, but like both of us were running against not only like the Democrat that's in power, but also progressive Democrats. And the thing I like to point out is a lot of the times they do sound the same as like a Green Party candidate or a Peace and Freedom candidate. They do they do believe in reducing military spending. They believe in housing for all, Medicare for all, free mass public transit. But the thing that's different from us is that even if they get elected, they will immediately be attacked by their own party. They'll be shut out from their own party. They won't be given any committee seats. They'll be given no political power, even with their seat. But the thing that we're pushing is that we intend to build a working class political party. What that means is that we're not going to go and be like, well, the rest of my party doesn't agree with me, like what a lot of the squad is doing, or we're not trying to move right to work with Democrats. What we intend to, um, even if we don't win, is use this office or use this candidacy as a bully pulpit to bring ideas, not to bring ideas that are not usually talked about, but also to galvanize and educate people who are not politically active, so that they know that there are people that are fighting with them, but that also that a there is a chance to build something outside of the corporate duopoly, and that's what makes us different. That we know how to organize, and we can use that seat to organize. Even if we look up in Seattle with Shama Sawant, they knew how to effectively um, make Democrats come to the left to them instead of going to the Democrats and moving themselves right. They knew how to call out Democrats by putting up legislation, by not watering it down, and they would tell the rest of the city, tell your Democrat representative to vote for this if they actually believe in democracy, if they actually believe in helping people. And that is what a Green or Peace and Freedom or socialist candidate can do in Congress or the state assembly. They can write bills, and when the Democrats vote against it, they can show the Democrats for who they are. They could try to amend other bills, and when those amendments are brought down, then they could show people for who they are. And I think that's the biggest thing that third party candidates need to do in separating themselves from progressive Democrats is we need to show how we're different and how our fundamental strategy is different. Because we know that the Democratic Party is not going to move left. We know Joe Biden's not going to move left, though how unpopular he is. We need to build an independent working class alternative.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you brought that up, and that kind of touches why I have certain problems with the DSA. And what I said earlier is that I feel like for the DSA, what we're seeing with the squatter is, I've heard it referred to as the fraud squad, because that's pretty much what they are, and is that at the end of the day, they will always fall towards capitalism. They will always, endorse Joe Biden. They will always endorse capitalist policies. They will always um, join the Democrats further to the right, just to just to do it, honestly. And that's the main problem I have with DSA. I think DSA, local DSA organizations and as a whole is a very nice, lovely organization, but for the politicians themselves, they tend to always just fall to capitalism in the end, and that's why I don't agree with having that, because it's like, yeah, we're Democrats, but we're socialists. They're right on the brink of that, and we just need to bring them further left into the green, into the peace and freedom party, get them to become full-on socialists, and those are the people. If we can get those Democratic Socialists turned into full-on Socialist Green Party members, though that is where we can make true progress instead of just having the best that we have just always falling to right-wing policies set by the Democrats and always just falling to capitalism in the end.
Yeah, one thing about it is I think that Greens and Peace and Freedom members that seek to hold office should probably take their time now to try practicing writing legislation. Because I practice writing legislation, I just haven't showed you yet, Aaron, because I'm afraid I made a mistake. As soon as I think it's good enough, I'll show you and you can add your 2 cents. But
Yeah. Hey, I've been practicing too. I practice with my students. I teach government, and I had to teach myself better how to write legislation so I can teach my students. I had an activity where I taught them how to write a bill. So
It's awesome.
we're getting that practice in.
It's awesome.
also too, I think, and this is weird, but I'm gonna say it. I think that Democrats who are in the Democratic Party but already hold their seats like federally or on the state legislative level. I have already said this a couple of times. If I win my seat, y'all can hide behind me and we can do the most leftist thing possible. I will take all the heat for it and we can do the most leftist thing possible. I can be the only person in my party in the state house, but I'm gonna do the most leftist thing possible because we have to do what's right by the people. If they're scared of what the Democratic Party will do to them, I'll introduce the legislation. So y'all ain't gotta be scared no more. And you can make the vote that is right for your constituency, and we can make California better, or we can make the federal government better.
It's very, very true. I do appreciate you giving your input on that, and yeah, definitely need to just work to move who you can left. You're obviously not gonna get the Republicans to go left, and you're not gonna get the Democrats to move left. The best people that you can try to bring into you are those people that are, you call themselves progressive Democratic Socialists, people that are just barely on the brink of the duopoly. They're here. The duopoly ends right here. They're on the brink of falling off the duopoly and joining true leftism groups and parties. And those are people that we can help bring over to the other side and hopefully fight for us, for the people. That's my hope, at least. And that's why I love talking to candidates like you two, because it's even as simple as running a local election in California, especially as deep of a blue as California is. And that's the good thing about where you're at least. It'd be, honestly, in my opinion, maybe people would feel differently, but it'd be probably a lot easier to get a Democrat to vote green than a Republican to vote green. So if you're in one of those deep blue areas of California, like Los Angeles, that might help bring in these voters in, especially if they consider themselves, more to the left, so on the right wing, but more to the left. They might not appreciate an incumbent Democrat or an opponent Democrat who might have these more Republican-like positions, and bring them to maybe not become on your side exactly, but bring them to give you a vote. And that's what's really important about reaching like voter outreach, and especially in an area like where you two are at. That's why it's you guys have like the perfect location for it, especially being like in the city limits and everything like that. I think you guys have a really solid campaign, and looking forward to talking with you guys more about how it'll go in March. And of course, I'll keep up with both of you guys' things. And we've been going for a while, so I think this is going to wrap up the podcast. Did you either of you want to add anything else?
Uh, yeah. So for my stuff, you can look me up. Mine's just Linktree and then Reveles for Congress. I have all of my links on there. But the last thing I'd like to add is please, if you whatever state you live in, join in your Green Party. If you're in California, the Peace of Freedom or the Green Party. I know there's a couple progressive parties out there, or just start a local organization. I've seen there's across the country there's plenty of local organizations that they kind of run their own progressives or socialists in nonpartisan races. I think that's a great idea. You don't need an organization already built. You can get a few friends together and just start getting involved with your community and running independent, progressive, and socialist races. And especially if you work with a tenants union or start or join one yourselves, I think that's our path to power.
Awesome. Anything else you wanted to wrap up with, Chanel?
Not really, only to say that most of my stuff will be up next week. I've lost a little bit of time because I have a cold right now and it threw off my schedule. But I know that if we keep working together as a community and leaning on each other, that we can create change that is necessary. We have to not be afraid of doing that work and knowing that the socialist policies that we're fighting for right now are what we need to save each other. We need each other. We need to work together as a community to get this stuff done because the politicians that currently exist are not going to do it for us. They're clearly working for their own self-satisfaction. So we gotta save ourselves. We gotta save our own neighbors. And we're only gonna do that as socialists with socialist policy.
Absolutely. That's a great way to end things off. I appreciate you two both being on here, and we'll certainly chat some more off the air about what you guys are doing in the future. And wish you guys the best of luck. And thank you guys for being on episode 4 of the podcast. Thank you guys for watching. All the viewers who stuck this long. This is our longest one so far, but it was great. We had 2 other people on, so you guys were awesome to have on here. Glad you guys worked together on everything, and we'll be sure to have another great guest for episode 5.